Okay, this video is following on the heels of the one just before it, about communication is the medium of RPGs. This video is about imagination. And so to begin, I'd like you to look at this, a strawberry. Now, I live in a part of Korea which is famous for its strawberries. Large, fresh. They hold a strawberry festival every March. I'd like you to think about strawberries, if you're not allergic to them, if you like them or if you don't. Consider, what does a strawberry smell like? What do they feel like in the hand? How big are they? How heavy are they? How juicy are they? When do they appear, if at all, in your part of the world? What do they taste like? Now, through this video, you're going to be hearing noises. There are a number of dogs around me, interested in things like this strawberry. And some of them I would like to come and just relax. You may hear them from time to time. Who are they? What do they look like? How big are they? Have you seen them before, or are they purely characters in your imagination? These things are all relevant to this video. Before we begin the video, more fuel for the imagination. This video is on imagination and RPGs, and on a related topic. We'll get to it soon. Okay. I love the power of imagination. It can make art move us. It can separate us from attachments we have, or connect us. It can form imaginary attachments to things we don't have. It can connect us to the real or the unreal. It makes words magical. It's light in darkness. It's darkness in light. Of course, it has its drawbacks. It's something that also allows fearful people to create cowardly ways to shield themselves from the monster under the bed. But nothing good comes without its price, and an army of the gullible to tax that price. C'est la vie. We must fight on. I would rather hold to the right to dream a better way than to surrender that right for fear that another's dream might dismay or disgust me. Anyway, the power of imagination is amazing. But is it the secret sauce of role-playing games? It is for me, at least in part. But it might not be for everyone. And before we dig into that, let's start with what imagination is. Not just what we might assume it is. That is, pictures in our minds. In the previous video, we explored the sadly not so obvious truth that conversation is the medium of RPGs, and how that might be relevant to us in practical terms as active gamers, rather than in the theoretical terms, which might be of more use to designers. As noted in that video, it's hard to talk about RPGs without summoning thoughts of imagination, and that leads to those oh-so-unhelpful knee-jerk reactions that,
No, imagination is the medium of RPGs. Imagination is the media of RPGs.
Don't worry, we can dispel that mistake quickly. First, though, what is imagination? Let's boil millennia of discussion down to a simpler definition. That imagination is the word we have been stuck with as English speakers to identify our capacity to process and extrapolate information from all of our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. That's it. And that's a lot. The sources for inspiration for the imagination are memory and remembered experience, current personal experience, and our interpretation of reported experiences. It comes from our senses, our emotions, our creativity, and what we have gleaned or understand from others' creativity. It's a laboratory, an art studio, an inexhaustible and indestructible test case. It's muse and canvas. It's a do-over machine and a what-if configuration device. It's virtually anything you can imagine it to be. It's more than images in the mind. It can be any sense or combination of senses. It can be a smell, the taste of a strawberry, the smell and taste of a strawberry. Your improved version of what an off-world strawberry might taste like, or a primeval strawberry might have tasted like. It can be based on experiences of the world around us, or be pure invention or creation, or some combination. It has a remarkable capacity to draw from any source of information we encounter, have encountered, might encounter, might never encounter, or can never encounter, and must instead create or invent, and then combine, recombine, bend, fold, manipulate, cast, recast, form, reform, review, revise, and test, play and replay, in whole, in part, over and over and over again. This includes, but is clearly not limited to, thoughts which lead to the invention of or an improvement to an existing device, or which allow people to win all the arguments and the almost fights they almost got into that time, which lead to the writing of or the creation of novels and great works of art, which lead to the illustration of an impossible place or a being who has or has not yet ever lived, which allow for a what-if analysis of an event we experienced personally, perceived from a distance, learned about from others, or came up with on our own. The imagination leads to thoughts which spark RPG campaigns, inspire cool characters, help us interpret dice results in new and interesting ways, and so much more. It's far more than holding a mental picture in our mind's eye. All of our senses can be involved, and what we conceive from what we perceive and or remember can be incredibly detailed and affecting. The same goes for what we conceive from what others have conceived in their minds, unmoored and unconnected from any actual sensory input from the world that surrounds us. Imaginary dogs are getting rowdy. Enough. Come on. Say hi. This is Kobe. He has a powerful imagination. Now get down with your powerful imagination. May, you want to get up? Hi, May. Is this your first time on YouTube? Cool. Go away. And this is Grace. Ho ho. Yeah. We're imagining a brighter future for her. All right. Stop. Sit down. Imagine what transpired just then. It's no wonder then that RPGs, more than any other activity since pure make-believe, have been connected so strongly to our faculty for imagination. After all, where do all those words go once we perceive them? That, it turns out, is a more interesting question than it seems at first, and, of course, is the reason why imagination is not the medium of the hobby. Conversation is. Let's repeat for those hunched down in the back muttering to themselves. It's our capacity to relay ideas in words which can load your imagination with whatever we might be doing in play. Our words are the medium that transports that information and our own creativity and might spark your imagination. The information affects you. How it's transmitted is the medium. Your imagination is a part of your processing of that information. Now, there are other threads in the cloth of information and imagination woven by our games. And we'll get into that set of threads in a subsequent video. But for now, I suspect you know what most of them are. System, intended and actual genre, setting, the characters we play, the people we are, our stated and unstated goals, our preferences, our biases, and all the types of decisions we make. Imagination is of tremendous use in RPGs, but is weirdly not essential. Though, honestly, my own experience wrestles with that understanding constantly. So let's be clear that this is not some argument in favor of not imagining. Far from it, actually. Now, I shouldn't have to say this. I shouldn't have to separate it out and make it obvious. But let's make it obvious, because to deny the evidence that so many people who hear the audio of these videos don't listen would be foolish. It would be equally foolish to ignore those who listen neither charitably nor honestly and serve their own ends, rather than being interested in sifting our way through ideas to find truth, or at least more truthful footing to stand upon. So, let's cover that base. This is not an argument against imagining. It's a call to those who don't imagine, asking you to consider it for the reasons we're going to discuss. It's a call to those who harangue the people who don't imagine, asking you to find something more useful to say, such as a reason why the people you play with who don't imagine should imagine, what practical benefit they'll gain from it when playing with you in your group and the games that your group has chosen to play. It's insufficient to say you should do it because I do it and I like it, so it's better. If you're having trouble coming up with those reasons, I hope this video will be able to help you find some practical and useful ones. This is also a call to those very few people who cannot imagine, and to those people who find that in play, all the varied parts of RPGs are just too much to handle all together in conjunction, and who must therefore make a considered effort about what they're going to pay attention to in order to play at all. It's just a note to say that for those who play, even though it's a struggle sometimes, that you're seen. You might be the newcomer, struggling with all of the novel and strange and weird things that make up RPGs, or you might be an anxious person who worries. You might wrestle with your attention. You might wrestle with trust of others or yourself. You might have things on your mind and have forgotten the simple joy of play. You might struggle with things beyond my experience. Whatever the case, for you, imagination is one of the things that you have chosen or have found you have to set aside in order to play at all. And yet, you are, have been, and will continue to be a part of the group who plays. Having played with many people in your situation in the past, I just want to say, for me, the play was fun. You contributed things that no one else could. Your presence, your wit, very importantly, your decisions. All the qualities that caused you to be chosen to be a part of the game group in the first place. Nothing was lost. The experience was not a waste of time. So, what is imagination good for? If it's a useful part of play, but isn't essential to it. Well, we can harness our imagination, of course, to create and encapsulate truly novel characters, or at least what we hope are. We can prepare for the unpredictability of games. We can inspire, we can craft, we can edit and fine-tune scenarios. We can imagine a dog behaving himself. Wouldn't that be a fantastic world? A world where the dog behaved himself? Yes, I think so. We can use it to build limitless, evolving sandboxes. We can realize quirky NPCs on the fly, or based on a mixture of traits from some weird baristas in a strange coffee shop 2 towns over. We can use it to test out tactics and strategies, to visualize impossible vistas, to do a host of creative things. Or we can instead use other means at our disposal, such as logic, attention to detail, memory, emulation, and speaking with our fellow players. I started talking with fellow gamers in the late 80s about what they imagine. This quickly led to a revision of the question to what and how they imagine, because there was such variation. And then that was again revised into what, how, and if they imagine. And the examples I'm going to use in the video are the most common ones. Those being that people either don't imagine consistently, or have chosen to actively include and develop their imagination in play. Now, you, dear viewer, may fall neatly into one of those categories, or somewhere less distinct along the spectrum that these examples provide. So, as said, some gamers don't imagine when they play. They still have an equal amount of fun, so don't worry. But their appreciation of and processes for playing RPGs do not include moments of imagination. For them, play flows through conversational exchange of information to comprehension and on to decision and back and forth. Some do imagine in one or more ways, but don't bother with the full range of what they're capable of. They might invoke only one of their senses, or not try to extend their conception of a moment of play beyond a scintilla of time, or beyond the boundaries of what was said, or some combination of these or other factors. Still others tie their imaginations to physical media used in support of play: maps, miniatures, pictures, audio files, music, props, this sort of thing. Giving those things more life and context than they have just sitting on the table, but not usually disconnecting them from the table to be set free in their mind's eye, or their mind's ear, or their mind's hand. Some gamers imagine passively, reactively, when inspired by play, such as some cool moment. They might do this before, during, or after the fact, but not consistently through play. More as a specific function of a specific need or pleasure in play. Now, we can see this when a GM holds up a picture and states that the environment of play is exactly like this picture, except for this long laundry list of how it's different. We need our imagination then to process what we see and change it into what it is, or at least what it's supposed to be. We also find it when someone references a scene from a film or a book and says how this moment is in some way like it. Some just fill idle moments with some form of imagination, but when it's their turn and they need to think about what they're going to do, what their action, reaction, interaction will be during that moment, they do not imagine. Some gamers, of course, like it implies on the cover of some RPG books, actively imagine the events, the characters, the settings, and evolving situations of play, and they do this for much of the time that they're playing, and maybe even before and after play as well. They might involve one or more senses, and they might have a lot of control over this facility, such as they can pause, rewind, revise, and skip moments as needed, while others might have a brilliant imagination but struggle and must exert concentration when there are moments of interruption or moments of greater information density or things that require them to stop imagining, let that break apart like a forgotten dream, and then rebuild it after the interruption. When we talk about things like switching costs in RPGs, where we change the mode of discourse, or we shift from communicating in character to dealing with the system, rolling dice and assigning damage and things like these moments of change, of switching from one conversational task to another conversational task, comes with a cost, and this is a big part of that cost. Some gamers, and these days the internet has fallen in love with pointing out in like a tidal wave of blind copy-paste script writing and faux hand-wringing sympathy, are limited in or are fully unable to generate mental images or, believe it or not, mental representations of their physical senses or their emotions or some variation. The internet wonders, how can they even play? Well, as noted earlier, tons of people don't bother to imagine anything at all, even though they can. So why we should separate out those with aphantasia is a little bit of a mystery. Further, these people can, at least as we're conceiving of it here, they can still imagine. Their imagination just doesn't include some of the parts that some other people's imagination might include, but this also is normal as well. So, more importantly, they are fully capable of using the medium of play to accomplish the goals of play. RPGs are a conversation about whatever our group chooses to make them about, using whatever game system we choose and whatever approach we discover accidentally or determine intentionally. You might be surprised how little description that can actually entail, leaving not much fuel for imagination, really. Or, in turn, you might be surprised at how much description can fill play, and how that, in turn, can be turned into control of when, how, or even if any imagining gets done. Of course, if you've experimented with lots of different games, you might not be surprised at all, especially if you've tried lots of different games with lots of different people in lots of different places. These examples they can't cover everyone, of course. This video is supposed to be brief. Perhaps we can all imagine further cases as practice of the subject matter of the video. But anyway, common thinking out there on the internet tends to miss most of this next point. So I've separated out here and put it at the end of the video. Not only is this point often missed, there are those among us who deny this idea even exists. And this is a result of either not paying attention, which, oddly enough, is kind of a hidden pun, and thanks to some agile straw manning, either for their own defense or, to make sure their agenda supersedes others. So what am I talking about? I'll hold off on identifying that for this moment, but perhaps you can guess. Okay. Imagination is an excellent bonus feature of play. However, it might not just be a bonus in the way that people might think. If a gamer sticks with RPGs for the long term, then we can rightfully assess that they are satisfying some goal or need by playing them, regardless of how they play. This might be purely social, or it might be a factor of their creativity or something else. Obviously, there's probably room for improvement of their enjoyment, but barring unhealthy behaviors, that they continue should be a sign that enjoyment is being had. Where imagination adds to the experience on a practical, not subjective level, is that it's an additional focus for our attention. It's something else we can pay attention to. And it gives those who actively imagine perhaps a slight advantage in stumbling across, in first discovering an immersive or engaging experience with play. Slight. Immersion? Are you talking about immersion? As we've discussed in depth on the podcast, you can find links to that in the description or in a card above. As we've discussed in depth on the podcast, focused attention can lead to that feeling of immersion or that of engagement, or both, or somewhere in between. And yes, I separate the experience of immersion into definable categories. Now, I have noted that the source of what gets commonly called immersion is a state of focused attention. And I've categorized all the reactions in terms of effects of focused attention. So the topic is actually attention. And under that, we can find immersion and engagement. In talking with gamers of different ages and different regions with different preferences across decades, I found it useful to think of their reports in terms of the things they focus on which do not require active thought, such as listening to description, bantering with others, and passively or reactively imagining the moment, and defined in terms of things which do require active thought, such as dealing with the rules or the dice, negotiating in or out of character, solving puzzles, or deducing some aspect of a mystery from a stack of clues, and, of course, focusing intentionally on their imagination of a moment of play. The passive or reactive side of these reports I think about as immersive attention, and it's useful to consider it separately because what might and might not support or disrupt it differs from its counterpart, what I call engagement. There's no uniform condition. There's no uniform disruption. Believe it or not, we vary. Imagination is certainly not the sole route to these feelings. It's one of many, but it is the kind of experience well suited to holding attention. The richer the imagination is, the more things about it draw our attention and make us want to pay attention to it. And if the imagination in question is strong enough, Well, that can make for great stories we tell afterward about the broad palette of what the term immersion actually applies to. There are experiences such as transportive moments of play, or a realization of how the hours flew by, or how the characters or the world or a location all seem so very real, like you really met them or were really there, you can really understand them, and so on. These are experiences which might trigger emotion, empathy, or sympathy, or understanding. It's not some unlikely hallucination of being someone else in some other place. It just requires attention. It doesn't require drugs or whatever else the condescending would like to apply to the experience. These moments of focused attention can be lured in by our imagination, but again are not tied to it exclusively. Anything which holds our attention can suffice. And remember, the medium of play is our primarily verbal exchange of information. How many groups restrict themselves to play which only communicates game information without pause, disruption, deviation, or mistake? More importantly, how much of what we say to one another in play is a direct feed to the imagination? So, our phantom aphantasia gamer can focus on the conversation and details of play, or on miniatures and tactical options, or dice probabilities, or on figuring out a mystery, or being true to a character, or so many things and combinations of things. And our imaginative visualizer with a panoramic full sensor suite of conceived perception can focus on these things too, or instead on a movie they create to play out in their heads, or some variation or combination. Both gamers have many opportunities to get swept away by play, but the person who chooses to use their imagination in a conscious way to represent some degree of a realized world in their mind has additional subject matter in which to immerse or with which to engage, and are already actively focusing on doing that. It's an additional point of intense focus to serve as a draw. Now, it's been said that our hobby is one of imagination designed by and for imaginative people, and one of those things has been routinely true in my case, and perhaps more from time to time. And how we work with the content of the games we enjoy can be evaluated and adjusted objectively to improve our experience with them. What we enjoy about those games, on the other hand, is largely subjective. And apart from tweaking our actual methods of play to be more in harmony with what we want and what the game we play allows for and supports, these subjective things are not up for argument, even though gamers, being what and who they allow themselves to tend to be, especially when magnified by the safe distance provided by the internet that cowards love so much, gamers tend to argue about preferences as if they matter more than practical techniques. Learning, refining, and sharing ways to improve the way we play is a choice we can always make. It's not too late, imagination or no. We can play the games we like better, and we can improve the ways we get what we want from gaming. And if we imagine hard enough and then put that into practice, we might even be able to realize a way to get these ways into print in our games, so that each successive generation of gamers can skip the real reinvention of these metaphorical wheels. If we are particularly fortunate and cogent, we might even be able to share ways to broaden and deepen our appreciation of the hobby beyond our initial likes and dislikes, biases, and preferences. Imagine what a world that might be. Anyway, until the next time, take care. And once you met the dogs, did they match up with how you imagined them? And after you met the dogs, did your imagination change?